Well, meanwhile, the Israeli military says it's taken control of the al-Shifa hospital in what it called an operation to thwart terrorist activity. The hospital is in Gaza City, in the north of the Strip. The Israeli military said troops came under fire and that 80 people were detained and others killed, including a senior commander of Hamas's internal security service. Well, these are images from the raid. You can hear those gunshots, can't you? As witnesses described heavy exchanges of fire around the site where thousands of displaced people are currently sheltering. And medics are also still working with patients who are being treated. Well, Gaza's health ministry said Israel was committing a war crime. Let's hear, though, from an Israeli government spokesperson now.
This morning, the IDF conducted a precise operation to thwart terrorism in the Shifa hospital area. Footage shows terrorists firing from deep within the Shifa complex. Our forces engaged the terrorists. Tens of Hamas terrorists have been detained in the Shifa hospital.
Well, the spokesperson there was talking about these images. Have a look. They were released by the IDF, who say they show troops coming under fire. It's a short clip that doesn't confirm the time or sequence of the events. Gaza health officials have repeatedly denied the accusation that Hamas fighters operate inside or underneath al-Shifa and other hospitals. Well, these pictures here show the aftermath of that raid. The Israeli military said there was no obligation for medical staff or patients to leave, and that the hospital could continue its important functions. But several medical staff inside the hospital told the BBC electricity had been cut and they'd been instructed by the Israeli military not to move, prohibiting them from properly treating their patients. Well, international medics who've worked in Gaza say the medics need to be protected.
I do not believe the IDF have provided any credible evidence since October the 7th, and indeed before then, that these hospitals were being used as Hamas command centres. I've been in Shifa Hospital on many occasions. I've spoken to people who I've known for many years who worked there, and I do not believe there is any evidence to suggest that.
Let's cross live now to Rafa and speak to James Elder, spokesperson for the United Nations Children's Fund. James, thanks for joining us here on BBC News. And let me just ask you, first of all, for your reaction to what we've been saying today about the potential famine that is going to hit Gaza very hard in the coming months.
Yeah, it's hitting Gaza. I mean, we might wait for an official classification, Mariam, but the reality is that won't mean a lot to people on the ground here. We are now seeing children dying of starvation, of malnutrition. Normally, Mariam, malnutrition is an underlying cause. It's not what kills a child. A child will die from something like pneumonia. To see a child die from malnutrition, because you've heard all those numbers, they're terrifying. We've never seen anything like this before in Gaza. As per that IPC, the classification on famine, we've never seen a classification as severe as this one for this many people, a percentage of people. But Mariam, when you drill it down to a child who is dying of malnutrition in a hospital, they'll look for a vein, they'll look for it in the arm, the body will look constricted, highly traumatic, and probably look for a vein in the head, and eventually the child will die. We are seeing this. Our very real fear is we're going to see it on a scale that we've never seen before.
What do you think now needs to happen to turn the tide? Because aid agencies are saying, aren't they, or at least Antonio Guterres said, that it's not too late to turn the tide.
And the Secretary General is dead right. The frustrating thing is it's not that complicated. It requires more land routes, and there are land routes within kilometres of where I am. More land routes to get aid in. Yes, we see airdrops. We see now ships coming in. The ship that it came in will be the equivalent of 12 or 13 trucks. Today, as I came back into Gaza, I passed hundreds and hundreds of trucks. So we need the facilitation of those trucks by the occupying power, who has a legal obligation. Facilitate them, get them in, flood Gaza with the food that literally is just a matter of kilometres from me, Mariam. And of course, a ceasefire. A ceasefire would enable people to breathe again for the trauma. You probably can't hear the drones. They are relentless. There is a trauma that is hitting children here just as hard as the food deprivation. So ceasefire and get the trucks that are so close and yet so far get them across Gaza to the families who so desperately need them.
James, we've just been breaking some news in the last half an hour that Israel's sending a delegation to Washington to talk about a potential military operation that has been mooted for a while now by Israel inside Rafah. Just give people who are watching this a sense of what that would mean to the over 1 million people who are inside Rafah right now if there were to be a military operation there of any sort.
That's mind-boggling. It makes my body shake. You see Rafah, it's very hard to walk in Rafah. There are informal settlements and tents and anywhere someone can move to because they were told to move here 3 or 4 times, having had their homes bombed or been evacuated under incursion or an offensive from a shelter they were in. So it's very hard to move in Rafah. It is a city of children, 600,000 plus children, twice the population density of New York City, but no high rises. Everyone's on the ground. An offensive in that area, I mean, it's terrifying. It's offensive to imagine. So we just hope that calm heads can prevail, because that would be utterly devastating for children, and we have seen some horrendous devastating for girls and boys of Gaza.
Okay, James Elder from the UN, thank you very much indeed for joining us live from Rafah.